As the taxi pulled up to the entrance of the opulent Regent Royal Hotel in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, Isabelle Price glanced at the towering marble columns, the gleaming glass windows reflecting the shimmering city lights. At 34, Isabelle had climbed the ranks of the corporate world to become the CEO of Price Consulting Group, a leading business consulting firm known for turning struggling companies into industry giants. But despite her undeniable success, today she felt an odd knot in her stomach, not because of any pressing business matter, but because she knew that entering this hotel, a place where the wealthy and elite gathered, would be the stage for yet another unpleasant reminder of the biases she'd faced in her career. Isabelle stepped out of the taxi, her sharp, tailored suit making her appear every bit the powerful businesswoman she was. She carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to authority, yet as her heels clicked across the hotel's grand entrance, she couldn't shake the feeling that the lobby's ornate decor and gilded pillars were more likely to hide disdain than admiration. Upon entering, Isabelle approached the reception desk, where a white, middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair sat behind a polished counter. His eyes scanned her, quickly dismissing her as yet another out-of-place guest. He straightened his tie and, in a voice too loud for comfort, asked, "Can I help you?" "I have a reservation under Isabelle Price," she replied, her voice calm but firm. The receptionist, who wore a pin with the hotel's logo, gave her a cold, uninterested smile. "Ah, yes, I see your reservation, but I do need to inform you that we only have one of our most basic rooms available at the moment. For the full luxury suite, we require a more substantial deposit. If you're willing to pay for the basic room, I can offer you an upgrade," he said with an insincere grin. Isabelle tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I'm certain I can handle the upgrade," she said smoothly. "How much would you say the basic room costs?" The manager looked at her with a mixture of skepticism and thinly veiled amusement. "The worst room in the house is $400, but I'm sure you wouldn't want to pay that much. You could save your money by taking the regular suite for the same price, if you're able to afford it." Isabelle met his gaze, her calm demeanor unfazed. "Let's make it a wager then. If I can pay you $400 for the worst room, will you give me the presidential suite for free?" The receptionist raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting such a response. He was certain she wouldn't be able to pay, perhaps assuming her race made her incapable of affording the hotel's luxurious offerings. Isabelle's poise and self-assurance only added to his misplaced certainty. "Well," he smirked, "I'll take that bet, but I'd suggest you rethink it. It might be a lot more than you're prepared for." Isabelle smiled. "I'm not worried," she said, her voice steady. Reaching into her leather handbag, Isabelle pulled out a neat stack of cash and placed it on the counter. The receptionist's eyes widened as he saw the money. "Here's your $400, she said coolly, "and I'll also leave my business card for you." The receptionist's smile faltered, and his eyes darted from the cash to the card. "CEO of Price Consulting Group." Isabelle noticed the shift in his posture, the shock spreading across his face. He had assumed she was some naive woman trying to buy a cheap room, but the moment he saw her card, the air in the lobby seemed to change. She wasn't just anyone. Isabelle was a CEO, a successful entrepreneur, and a woman who had worked hard to earn every ounce of respect she had. The receptionist, realizing his mistake, stammered, I didn't know." "No," Isabelle interrupted, her voice colder now. "You didn't." She paused for a moment, the tension rising in the air, before pulling out her phone. Isabelle began recording the entire interaction, her calm demeanor betraying the storm beneath. The receptionist's face grew flushed with embarrassment as he tried to regain his composure. "Let's be clear," Isabelle continued. "You just humiliated me, but now you'll be held accountable for your actions." At this point, she was no longer playing his game. Isabelle calmly pressed a few buttons on her phone, dialing Marcus Jenkins, her trusted lawyer who specialized in corporate and racial discrimination cases. The moment Marcus picked up, Isabelle could feel the power dynamics shifting. "Marcus," she said with a tone of authority, "I need you to prepare for some legal action. It's time to teach someone a lesson." Meanwhile, The receptionist's anxiety grew as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Isabelle calmly leaned forward and added, "And if you're wondering, my close ally in this industry is James Fletcher, the CEO of Fletcher Hospitality Group. You might have heard of him. I think you'll agree that he won't be too happy about this." The name James Fletcher hit him like a cold slap. A well-known name in the hospitality industry, Fletcher's support would be a massive blow to anyone trying to maintain their position in such an elite environment. Before the receptionist could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the lobby, and a woman entered, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She was tall, with short, platinum blonde hair and the unmistakable air of someone who commanded attention. Patricia Monroe, regional director at Fletcher Hospitality Group, noticed Isabelle instantly. Patricia's surprise morphed into a look of disbelief as she approached. "Isabelle," Patricia said, her voice smooth but edged with surprise. "What's going on here?" Isabelle wasted no time in recounting the entire situation. Patricia, after listening intently, turned to the receptionist. "Explain yourself," she demanded, her tone brokering no argument. The receptionist fumbled for words, his confidence shattered. "You're fired," Patricia said, her voice like a dagger, "and I'll make sure your actions follow you. Don't think for a second you'll work anywhere near high-end hotels again." With Patricia's intervention, the situation began to unfold in Isabelle's favor. The receptionist was quickly escorted out, his career in shambles. Isabelle's calm, confident handling of the situation had completely turned the tables. The hotel would no longer be a place where people like Isabelle were dismissed. This was the beginning of a change. As Isabelle turned to leave, she couldn't help but smile inwardly. This wasn't just about the hotel. It was about challenging assumptions, about showing that people who underestimated her would one day regret it. The power of her status and connections had shifted the entire course of her experience. The night wasn't over yet, but Isabelle had made her point clear. 6 months had passed since Isabelle Price's fateful encounter at the Regent Royal Hotel, and much had changed, not just for her, but for the hotel itself. The events of that night had rippled far beyond the hotel's marble walls. Isabelle's social media and professional networks had buzzed with her story, and soon, the hotel's actions were being scrutinized by the media, the public, and business leaders across the city. What had started as a simple act of arrogance on the part of the hotel manager had spiraled into a full-blown public scandal. Isabelle had turned the tide in her favor, but it hadn't been easy. She had spent the months following that night making sure that Gerald Thompson, the former hotel manager, faced consequences. His career had crumbled almost immediately after his public humiliation. The hotel's ownership had quickly distanced itself from him, and his name was now a symbol of professional failure. It wasn't just about him, though. Isabelle had made it clear that systemic biases in high-status spaces like luxury hotels could no longer go unnoticed or unchallenged. In the months since the confrontation, Isabelle had become a force in the conversation surrounding diversity, inclusion, and accountability in the corporate world. As the sun set over the city, Isabelle was sitting in her office, looking out at the skyline. The lights of Los Angeles were twinkling below, a city of dreams, and a city of injustices, too. But tonight, Isabelle felt a quiet satisfaction. She had spent the last few weeks preparing for a major conference on diversity in corporate leadership. It was being hosted by a major firm in the city, and Isabelle had been invited to be one of the keynote speakers. She looked at her phone. A message from Marcus Jenkins, her lawyer, popped up. "Just got off the phone with the Regent Royal's new management. They want to meet you in person to discuss some adjustments." Isabelle smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. The hotel's management had been in contact with her office ever since the backlash began. They were looking to make amends. At the conference the following day, Isabelle stood at the podium, her heart steady as she looked out at the crowd. Her speech was powerful, and her words struck a chord with the room full of business executives, HR professionals, and industry leaders. "Success?" Isabelle began, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Isn't just about profitability. It's about respect. The ability to create an environment where people of all backgrounds can thrive, where they are not judged by the color of their skin or the assumptions others make about them. She paused, letting her words sink in. 6 months ago, I walked into a hotel where I was met not with respect, but with suspicion. They saw a woman of color in a tailored suit and assumed she didn't belong. They assumed my success was a fluke. That night, I turned their assumptions around, but it shouldn't have to come to that. It's time to make sure that people like me don't have to prove their worth every single time we walk into a room. Isabelle's speech was met with applause, but it was clear that her message was more than just about her. It was about a shift in the culture of the corporate world. As she left the stage, Isabelle was greeted by Patricia Monroe, the woman who had intervened in the incident at the hotel. Patricia, who now led her own diversity consulting firm, had been an invaluable ally during the entire process. They exchanged smiles, both knowing how far they had come. "Your speech was incredible," Patricia said, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Thanks," Isabelle replied. "But it's not just about the speech. It's about the work we continue to do, the work that needs to be done every day, in every corner of every office." As the conference continued, Isabelle was approached by more leaders in the industry. They were eager to hear about her experiences and to learn how they could create more inclusive workplaces. Isabelle had become an influential figure in the fight for equality, and her firm, Price Consulting Group, had grown exponentially, taking on high-profile clients looking to implement diversity and inclusion programs. As the evening wore on, Isabelle found herself alone in the hotel's rooftop lounge, sipping a glass of champagne. The glittering skyline stretched out before her, but this time, it didn't seem as distant. She had earned her place here. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from James Fletcher, the CEO of Fletcher Hospitality Group, one of the industry's biggest names. Isabelle had mentioned him during the incident with the Regent Royal Hotel, and the call she had been expecting had finally come. "Isabelle," James said, his voice deep and warm, "I've been following everything you've been doing. You've made quite an impact." "Thanks," Isabelle replied. "It's been a lot of work, but I believe the fight is worth it." James paused before speaking again. "I want you to know that we're looking into the Regent Royal's practices. We've already started a review of their internal policies, and we'll be making some serious changes in the next few months." Isabelle's smile widened. "I'm glad to hear that. The changes need to be systemic. It's not just about one manager or one hotel. It's about the entire industry." "Exactly," James said. "I'm sure we'll be in touch soon." As she hung up, Isabelle allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had come so far from that initial moment of humiliation, but the fight was far from over. The landscape of corporate America was changing, but it was still too early to declare victory. What mattered now was holding those in power accountable and ensuring that the work continued, day after day. But tonight, Isabelle could rest easy. The changes were happening, and she was at the forefront. Months passed, and Isabelle Price's influence in the corporate world continued to grow. Her firm had become the go-to resource for companies seeking to implement comprehensive diversity and inclusion programs. Her reputation as both a leader and a relentless advocate for change had sparked a new wave of corporate accountability. But while Isabelle's professional life flourished, the events of that night at the Regent Royal Hotel, a night that had changed everything for her, remained firmly in her thoughts. She had proven herself, yes, but she had also exposed a deeper truth, one that continued to haunt high-status spaces across the nation. Discrimination was still rampant in places where wealth and power reigned supreme. As Isabelle sat in her office late one evening, reviewing contracts and client feedback, she couldn't help but reflect on the long road ahead. She had fought the battle for herself, but she now had to fight it for others. Those who didn't have the same access to resources, to power, or to influence. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. It was Marcus Jenkins, her trusted lawyer. "Isabelle, we've got a development with the Regent Royal," he said, his tone serious. Isabelle leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "What's happened now?" "They're trying to clean up their act. Publicly, at least," Marcus explained. "They've been in touch with a few of our allies, and it seems like they're looking to offer you some kind of compensation for what happened." Isabelle paused, considering the implications. And what does that mean for us? What are they offering? Marcus sighed. They've scheduled a meeting. They're offering a substantial donation to a charity of your choice, along with an apology for their actions. But I don't know what they really expect in return. They're looking to save face, Isabelle. Isabelle stared at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. The Regent Royal was trying to smooth over its public image, but Isabelle knew the hotel's real issue wasn't simply a matter of public relations. It was about the people they had harmed. The power dynamics, the arrogance, the way they treated others based on assumptions and bias. The hotel's apology meant little to her unless it was accompanied by real change. "I'll take the meeting," Isabelle said finally, her voice cool. "But I'm not doing this for them. If they want redemption, they're going to have to prove they're serious about it. Not just with a donation or a press release, but with systemic changes." The following week, Isabelle walked into the Regent Royal Hotel once more. This time, the atmosphere was different. The staff were more reserved, and the lobby felt quieter, as if it were waiting for something to unfold. Isabelle was greeted by a new manager, Clara Benson, a woman in her early 40s who had only recently taken over the position. "Ms. Price, it's an honor to have you here," Clara said with a genuine smile, extending her hand. Isabelle shook her hand firmly. "The honor is mine," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. They walked together to a private conference room, where representatives from the hotel's ownership group were already seated. There was an air of tension in the room, as if everyone was unsure of how to proceed. Isabelle sat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of the situation. "Isabelle, we want to start by acknowledging the events that took place here several months ago," Clara began, her voice steady but laden with hesitation. "We've heard your concerns and have been working diligently to ensure something like this never happens again. We've made internal changes, including new diversity training programs, a review of our hiring practices, and a commitment to ensure our guests are treated with dignity and respect, no matter their background." Isabelle didn't say anything at first. She was assessing the sincerity of their words, but deep down, she knew that true change was not just about making empty promises. It was about accountability and transformation. "I appreciate the changes you've made so far," Isabelle said, her voice measured. "But this goes beyond just training. It's about the culture. It's about who is in power, who is making the decisions, and whether or not those decisions are being made with equity and fairness." Clara nodded, understanding the weight of Isabelle's words. "You're right, Isabelle. This is just the beginning and we know it. We want to work with you to implement a lasting framework that holds all of us accountable." Isabelle leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. "And that's where we start," she said. "I'm not here for a simple apology or a donation. I'm here because I want to see the Regent Royal become a model for how the hospitality industry can lead the charge on inclusivity. I want to see you implement a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program that is measurable, that includes clear benchmarks, and that holds management accountable." The room was silent for a moment as Isabelle's words sank in. She could see the hesitation in some of the faces around the table, but she wasn't about to back down. "If you're serious about this," Isabelle continued, "I'll be more than happy to help. I'll work with your team, provide consulting, and ensure you're meeting the standards that your guests deserve. But make no mistake, this is a partnership, not a favor. If you want to change your image, it has to come from within." Clara nodded, a look of resolve on her face. "We're committed to doing the work, and we're willing to make this a long-term commitment." Isabelle's gaze softened, but her determination remained strong. "Then let's get to work." The meeting lasted for hours as they discussed the details of the partnership and the steps they would take to overhaul the hotel's internal policies and guest experiences. By the end of it, Isabelle felt the first glimmer of hope that the hotel might actually follow through on their promises. It was just the beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. As Isabelle walked out of the Regent Royal Hotel, she knew that this was more than just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who had been overlooked, underestimated, and discriminated against. And with that, Isabelle Price knew that she had made a real difference. Isabelle Price's commitment to systemic change continued to gather momentum in the months following her meeting with the Regent Royal Hotel. Her influence in the corporate world had reached new heights, and her efforts to reshape the hospitality industry had inspired a wave of reform in other sectors as well. Her name was now synonymous with both success and justice. A woman who had used her power and resources not for personal gain, but to dismantle the very systems that sought to undermine people based on their identity. As Isabelle prepared for another high-profile meeting, this time with a major tech firm looking to overhaul its diversity initiatives, she reflected on how far she had come. What had begun as a personal confrontation in a luxury hotel had blossomed into a movement, one that had sparked conversations and policy changes across industries. But despite all her achievements, Isabelle couldn't forget the face of Gerald Thompson, the former hotel manager. Though his career had been shattered, his actions continued to echo through the corridors of her mind. She understood now that his mistake wasn't just about one man's prejudice. It was about a larger, deeply ingrained issue of power and bias that many people were still unwilling to confront. It was a week after the Regent Royal Hotel meeting when Isabelle received an unexpected call from Patricia Monroe, the ally who had stepped in on her behalf all those months ago. Patricia, now a consultant herself, had been working alongside Isabelle in the effort to change corporate cultures. "Isabelle, we've got some news," Patricia said, her voice tinged with both excitement and urgency. "You need to hear this. It's about Gerald Thompson." Isabelle's pulse quickened. "What about him?" "He's been spreading some things, false things, about the hotel's commitment to change. Apparently, he's been telling people that the whole diversity initiative is just a cover-up, a PR stunt. He's trying to undermine everything you've been working for." Isabelle's grip tightened around her phone. "He's still trying to spin this into something about me, isn't he?" "He is. And I'm not the only one who's hearing this. I've had multiple sources from within the Regent Royals network reach out to me, saying that he's been trashing your name, calling you a bought and paid for consultant, and insinuating that you've manipulated everything for your own gain." Isabelle felt a flash of anger, but it quickly turned into something colder: determination. She had fought too hard to let one man's bitterness derail the work that was so much bigger than him. "I want to meet him," Isabelle said firmly. "I'll deal with this. We've come too far for him to do this now." Patricia paused before responding. "You sure you want to handle this personally?" "I've handled worse," Isabelle replied, her voice unwavering. "It's time to confront the root of the issue, and that means facing him head-on. I'm not afraid of him." Later that day, Isabelle found herself standing in front of a small, nondescript office in a low-income neighborhood of Los Angeles. Gerald Thompson had fallen far since his fall from grace at the Regent Royal Hotel. No longer living in luxury, he had taken a job at a shabby motel, far removed from the world of high-end hospitality. As Isabelle walked through the motel's faded hallways, she couldn't help but reflect on how far one's actions could drag them down. Gerald Thompson's arrogance had cost him everything, but what had he truly learned from it? She knocked sharply on the door of the office. Gerald opened it, his face betraying a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "You," he spat, his eyes narrowing. Isabelle met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, me. We need to talk." Gerald's eyes flickered with recognition, and for a moment, his bravado faltered. He stepped aside reluctantly, allowing her to enter. "I know what you've been saying," Isabelle began, her tone cold but controlled. "And I'm here to make it clear that I won't let you ruin the progress we've made. You tried to discredit me, to undermine everything we've worked for. But you've failed. This isn't about you or me. It's about accountability. You can't just erase the truth because you're bitter about being exposed." Gerald scoffed, his expression hardening. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? You think you've changed anything? You're just one consultant with an inflated sense of self-worth. This hotel, the industry, it'll go back to normal in a few months. They'll forget about all this nonsense." "That's where you're wrong," Isabelle replied, stepping closer, her voice steady but firm. "You're right about one thing: the hotel might try to brush this under the rug. But the truth doesn't disappear. It lingers. And every time someone like you tries to drag others down, there's someone like me who will be ready to stand in your way." Gerald clenched his fists, his face reddening, but Isabelle didn't flinch. "You've lost, Gerald," she said calmly. Not just your job, but your dignity. You can't go back to the way things were. Not for you, and not for anyone who thinks they can disrespect people without consequences. The silence in the room stretched for a moment before Gerald finally spoke, his voice a hollow whisper. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Isabelle didn't offer him forgiveness. She didn't need to. The truth was enough. I'm not here for your apology, she said. But if you want to avoid making this worse for yourself, I suggest you keep quiet and let the change happen. Because this is bigger than you. And you can't stop it. She turned and walked out, leaving Gerald standing in the dusty motel office. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his own failure. Isabelle knew the road ahead would be long, and there would be many more people like Gerald who would fight against change, out of fear or ignorance. But her resolve had never been stronger. The world was waking up, and she would be at the forefront, ensuring that no one, especially people of color, would ever again be made to feel small or insignificant. As she walked back into the sunlight, Isabelle knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a fight for the future. The months following Isabelle Price's confrontation with Gerald Thompson had been a whirlwind of new initiatives, policy changes, and growing influence. She had faced adversity at every turn, but each challenge only solidified her resolve to continue the fight for justice and equality. What had begun as a personal mission had evolved into something much larger, an industry-wide call for transformation. Isabelle's firm, Price Consulting Group, had become a beacon for organizations looking to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her reputation as both a leader and a fierce advocate had attracted clients from all sectors, from tech giants to nonprofits, all eager to create cultures that reflected the true values of fairness and respect. But amidst her professional triumphs, there was a constant reminder that the fight was far from over. The work was never complete. It was ongoing, and for Isabelle it had become a legacy. She often reflected on the journey, on how far she had come from that first encounter at the Regent Royal Hotel, and how one single moment had changed the course of her life, and the lives of many others. One evening, as she prepared for another high-profile speaking engagement, Isabelle received a call from Patricia Monroe, her closest ally in the fight for corporate reform. Isabelle, I need to talk to you. It's urgent, Patricia said, her voice tense. What's going on? Isabelle asked, a tinge of concern creeping into her voice. I just got word from one of our contacts in the industry, Patricia continued. There's been a major shakeup at Fletcher Hospitality Group. James Fletcher's been accused of something serious, corruption, embezzlement, you name it, and it looks like it's going to hit the media soon. Isabelle froze. James Fletcher, the man who had been one of her strongest supporters in the corporate world, had always been a staunch ally. To hear such allegations made her blood run cold. Are you sure about this? Isabelle asked, her mind racing. I have the proof. It's going to come out. Isabelle, Patricia replied, her voice heavy. I think we need to prepare for this. It's going to be big. Isabelle sat down at her desk, the weight of the situation sinking in. This was not just about James Fletcher. It was about the very foundation of the industry she had worked so hard to reform. If these allegations were true, it would send shockwaves through the entire corporate world, undermining everything they had fought for. We need to handle this carefully, Isabelle said, her voice steady. Patricia, we've spent years working to change how companies operate. If this blows up, it could undo everything. We need to make sure we control the narrative. I'll reach out to the press, and we'll work with our allies to make sure the truth gets out. As she prepared to handle the unfolding crisis, Isabelle couldn't help but think about the complexity of power dynamics. She had built her reputation on the principle of fairness, of accountability. Now, it was time to ensure that those principles held true, even for someone like James Fletcher, whom she had once considered an ally. The following day, the media storm hit. The headlines were impossible to ignore. Fletcher Hospitality CEO accused of embezzlement and corruption. The story was everywhere, dominating the news cycle. Isabelle took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Marcus, she said, I need your help. We need to navigate this carefully. Let's ensure we're part of the conversation before things spiral out of control. Marcus, ever the seasoned professional, agreed. We'll make sure the narrative stays in our favor. We've worked too hard to let this derail the progress we've made. Let's do this right. As the week unfolded, Isabelle found herself embroiled in the media frenzy, not as a participant in the scandal, but as someone who was helping to guide the conversation toward transparency and reform. She issued a public statement calling for accountability in corporate leadership, regardless of how powerful the individuals involved were. She emphasized that no one, not even the people who had helped her along the way, was exempt from scrutiny. Leadership is not about power, Isabelle said in a televised interview. It's about responsibility. And when those in power abuse that responsibility, we must hold them accountable. No one is above the law, and no one is above the principles of fairness and justice. Isabelle's words resonated deeply with the public, and the support she received was overwhelming. She had built a reputation not just for her business acumen but for her integrity. As the scandal continued to unfold, she made it clear that the fight for justice and fairness in corporate America was bigger than any individual, no matter how influential they were. James Fletcher eventually stepped down from his position as CEO of Fletcher Hospitality Group amidst the allegations, and his career was effectively over. The scandal was a painful reminder that even those who had once stood alongside Isabelle in her battle for change could fall victim to the same forces of greed and corruption. But Isabelle's commitment to justice never wavered. As the dust settled, she focused on the next phase of her mission, ensuring that companies like Fletcher Hospitality would never again be allowed to operate in secrecy, with no accountability for their actions. A few weeks later, Isabelle was invited to speak at a global business summit, a prestigious event that would put her in front of industry leaders from around the world. It was an opportunity to not just speak on diversity, but on the broader issues of ethical leadership, transparency, and accountability. Before the event, she found herself reflecting once again on the road she had traveled. From the moment she had walked into the Regent Royal Hotel to the scandal involving James Fletcher, Isabelle had faced her fair share of challenges. But she had never once backed down. As she took the stage at the summit, she looked out over the sea of faces, executives, entrepreneurs, and influencers who held the future of corporate America in their hands. She knew that this was her moment to continue the fight, to push forward the work that was bigger than any individual, any corporation, any single scandal. Success is not a destination, Isabelle said, her voice ringing with authority. Success is the work we do every day to create a world where everyone has a chance to thrive. It's about lifting others up and ensuring that no one is ever left behind. We have the power to make change, and we must wield that power responsibly. As she finished her speech, the applause was thunderous. But Isabelle knew that the true victory was not in the applause. It was in the work yet to be done. Isabelle Price stood at the edge of a new chapter in her life. The corporate world had taken notice of her words, her actions, her relentless drive for change, and the shift had begun. But this was only the beginning. Her journey wasn't just about reforming businesses or putting out fires in high-profile scandals. It was about leaving behind a legacy that would shape the world for generations to come. Her speech at the Global Business Summit had resonated far beyond the walls of that auditorium. Over the next few weeks, companies began reaching out, asking for Isabelle's help in transforming their corporate cultures. She was no longer just a consultant. She had become a symbol of what true leadership looked like, a leadership rooted in compassion, responsibility, and unshakable integrity. But despite the outward success, Isabelle couldn't shake the quiet exhaustion that lingered beneath the surface. The years of fighting, of battling systems of power and prejudice, had taken their toll. She had risen, yes, but the weight of the journey was always with her. One evening, as she sat in her office, surrounded by the hum of city lights through her floor-to-ceiling windows, Isabelle received an unexpected call from Clara Benson, the new manager at the Regent Royal Hotel. Since their last meeting, Isabelle had kept tabs on the hotel's progress, cautiously optimistic but still aware of the deep-rooted challenges that lay ahead. "Isabelle, I wanted to thank you personally," Clara said, her tone warm but laced with a hint of uncertainty. "We've made significant changes since that day. The training programs you helped implement are already showing results, and our staff is more committed to inclusivity than ever before." Isabelle smiled, but her mind wandered back to the early days. The tension, the arrogance, the challenge of pushing forward against a deeply entrenched system. I'm glad to hear that, Clara. It's a long road, but progress is always worth the fight. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Clara's voice dropped slightly. I hope you're still open to working with us on a more permanent basis. We'd like to offer you a position on our advisory board to help guide the hotel through the next phase of transformation. We believe your insight could help us solidify the changes we've started and create a true culture of respect. Isabelle's heart skipped a beat. A position at the Regent Royal. A prestigious institution that had once symbolized exclusion, elitism, and discrimination, was now offering her a place at the table. The irony wasn't lost on her, and yet, she found herself reflecting on how far they had come. I'm honored by the offer, Clara, Isabelle said after a long pause. But I need to be clear with you. This position isn't about prestige. It's about continued accountability and making sure that the changes you're implementing are real, not just for show. I won't back down from holding you accountable if needed. Clara's voice held a sense of resolve. Of course, we understand. We need someone like you to keep us grounded. We want to be the hotel that sets a new standard in hospitality, and we can't do that without you. Isabelle leaned back in her chair, considering the opportunity. It wasn't just about the position. It was about making sure that the hotel remained on track, that its commitment to inclusivity wasn't just a trend, but a permanent transformation. This was a chance to be a part of something bigger, something lasting. I'll accept the offer, Isabelle said, her voice steady. But let's make sure we never lose sight of the work that needs to be done. This is only the beginning. The next few months saw Isabelle's involvement with the Regent Royal Hotel grow as she joined their advisory board. Her input was invaluable, not just in creating more robust diversity programs, but in helping them navigate the complexities of maintaining integrity in a world that often prioritized profit over people. The changes she had instigated, both in the hotel and in the industry, were becoming the new standard. And Isabelle, with her sharp mind and fierce sense of justice, was at the heart of it all. As the holiday season approached, Isabelle found herself looking back on the journey she had taken. From that first day at the Regent Royal Hotel, to the scandal involving James Fletcher, to the partnerships she had forged and the lives she had touched. It had been a ride full of highs and lows, but she had never faltered. Isabelle had learned that the fight for justice was not about quick victories. It was about persistence. It was about laying the groundwork for future generations to continue the work she had started. And she had done that. She had built something that could not be undone. That evening, as Isabelle prepared for another important meeting with Patricia Monroe, she paused for a moment to reflect. The office she had once felt so alien in had become a place of sanctuary, a symbol of her work, her journey, and her legacy. Isabelle's phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus Jenkins, her lawyer and trusted friend. "You've done it," he texted. "You've changed the game." Isabelle smiled softly, knowing that this battle was won. But the war for justice, equality, and fairness would never truly end. She was just one soldier in a much larger army, but her role had been pivotal. And as she looked out over the city, the lights twinkling below, she knew that her work wasn't over. It was only just beginning.